Psychedelics and the rewiring of reality, how altered states reveal hidden truths. The mind has doors we've forgotten how to open. And yet, throughout history, a curious class of substances, found in mushrooms, vines, cacti, and synthesized in secret labs, have offered us the key: psychedelics. Their reputation is double-edged, mystical medicine to some, dangerous delusion to others. But in recent years, a renaissance has unfolded. Science is no longer whispering about them in back rooms. Today, in labs from Johns Hopkins to Imperial College London, psychedelics are being studied with serious intent, and the results are rewriting everything we thought we knew about the brain, the self, and reality itself. So what exactly is happening when we ingest a psychedelic compound? Why do these tiny molecules unleash such colossal transformations in consciousness? Why do people emerge from these journeys with visions of divine unity, encounters with otherworldly intelligence, or a sudden visceral clarity about their life's meaning? The answers lie not just in the trip, but in the structure of the mind itself. Let's begin where the science begins, in the default mode network. You've heard this before, a network of interconnected brain regions responsible for self-referential thought, the ongoing internal monologue, the narrative of me. Under psychedelics, the DMN quiets, sometimes drastically, and when it does, something astonishing happens. Parts of the brain that rarely communicate begin speaking fluently. New connections form between sensory regions, emotion centers, memory banks. The brain lights up like a symphony, not with louder noise, but with richer harmony. This temporary disintegration of the ego network seems to unleash a kind of cognitive flexibility, where the boundaries that usually shape our perception of time, self, even logic, begin to dissolve. And in that dissolution, a deeper awareness emerges. But the science doesn't stop at the brain. In subjective reports across cultures and centuries, people describe near-identical motifs during psychedelic experiences: the feeling of oneness with all things, encounters with a divine intelligence, the sense that time has stopped, reversed, or become irrelevant. These aren't just hallucinations in the ordinary sense. They seem to come with profound emotional and philosophical weight, the kind that doesn't vanish when the chemical wears off. In fact, studies show that a single high-dose psilocybin session can lead to lasting improvements in depression, anxiety, and addictive behaviors. But beyond therapeutic value, many describe these moments as among the most meaningful of their lives, up there with the birth of a child or the death of a loved one. So why do these experiences feel so real, more real than real? Some neuroscientists suggest that psychedelics destabilize the brain's predictive coding. Normally, your brain isn't reacting to reality. It's predicting it and correcting errors along the way. Psychedelics, in this view, reduce the weight of prior assumptions and let raw sensory data flood in. You stop hallucinating consensus reality and start seeing something else. Others go further. They argue that psychedelics don't just alter perception, they alter the medium of perception itself. They open a crack in the conceptual lens we use to filter the infinite into something manageable. And through that crack, something larger, perhaps even transcendent, shines through. What's compelling is how consistent the data is. Whether it's DMT, LSD, psilocybin, or mescaline, similar neural signatures appear. Reduced activity in the DMN, increased global connectivity, enhanced entropy in brain signals. In other words, the brain becomes less ordered, more free, and surprisingly, more conscious, which challenges our usual assumptions. Because if the ego dissolves, and yet awareness increases, what was the ego doing to begin with? Was it shielding us or trapping us? And more provocatively, are these states tapping into a deeper layer of reality, one that is always there, hidden behind the scaffolding of normal thought? As we continue, we'll explore the brain mechanisms, the philosophical implications, and the mysterious overlap between psychedelic science and ancient mysticism. Because perhaps through these altered states, the brain is not being distorted, but reminded. To understand how psychedelics rewire the brain, and possibly reality, we need to dive into the realm of neuroscience, where electrical storms of thought flicker through webs of neurons, and every experience is the echo of a firing synapse. But something strange happens under the influence of psychedelics. The usual structure collapses. The brain becomes more interconnected. Pathways that never speak to each other suddenly light up in dialogue. This is not metaphor. It's visible in brain scans. Take psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms. When scientists placed volunteers into an fMRI machine after ingesting psilocybin, they didn't just see more brain activity. They saw different brain activity. Parts of the brain that normally function in isolation, like the visual cortex, auditory centers, and emotional regulation areas, began firing together in synchrony. The default mode network, that neural loop so closely associated with the ego and narrative self, quieted dramatically. In its place, a blooming of global connectivity. The brain looked freed, like a city in which all the walls had suddenly turned to windows. Researchers called this state entropy, a breakdown of rigid, habitual patterns in the mind. But that breakdown isn't chaos, it's potential, possibility, a temporary unstructuring that allows for new structures to form, not only during the trip, but long after. These experiences are not passive. They demand participation. They demand surrender. You must meet what arises, not resist, not interpret, but witness. And in that witnessing, healing often occurs. Because here's the paradox. What psychedelics show you is not new. It is what was always there, beneath the noise. The part of you that is already whole, already wise, already enough. This is why so many describe their journeys as remembering, not discovering, but returning. Returning to self, to spirit, to source. But the terrain of altered states is not all light. Some journeys are dark, terrifying, disorienting. They confront the ego with its deepest fears: death, loss, nothingness. These are often called bad trips, but seasoned guides know better. These are difficult trips, and often the most transformative. Because to face the abyss and not flee, to watch your identity dissolve and still remain, is to discover the one thing that cannot be lost: awareness itself. This is what mystics have spoken of across cultures: the dark night of the soul, the ego's unraveling, the surrender into emptiness that gives rise to fullness. Psychedelics simulate death, and in doing so, they can teach us how to truly live. But what if the visions are more than metaphor? What if the intelligence encountered in these states, the beings, the voices, the light, are not just projections, but glimpses into a larger field? After all, many report similar encounters across cultures and substances. The sense of communicating with entities, of being shown knowledge, of receiving lessons too precise to dismiss. Terence McKenna called it the tryptamine hyperdimension, a realm accessible through DMT, inhabited by what he called machine elves or fractal intelligences. Are these Jungian archetypes or inhabitants of another dimension? From a strict materialist view, these are hallucinations, artifacts of a disinhibited brain. But even within neuroscience, some wonder, if the brain can access this much novel information internally, what is it tapping into? Could the brain under psychedelics behave less like a simulator and more like an antenna? Could consciousness be non-local, and these altered states are tuning us into frequencies usually filtered out? The idea seems far-fetched until you realize how little we understand about consciousness at all. We know the correlations between brain activity and experience, but the why, the how, remains a mystery. And in that gap, we must stay humble. Because perhaps psychedelics are not revealing external aliens or spirits. Perhaps they are showing us ourselves, but a self that transcends the personal. A self that is not Don or Mary or Kareem, but being itself. In the Hindu tradition, this is called Atman, the soul, the spark of the divine within. And in the deepest psychedelic states, people often speak of merging with this essence, a state of non-duality, of allness, no subject, no object, just is. This is the experience that changes everything. It doesn't matter if you remember every detail. The mind may forget, but something deeper does not. A shift occurs, subtle, sometimes unnameable, but irreversible. You look at the world differently. You listen with more presence. You forgive more easily. You're less afraid of death because you've tasted something beyond it. This is not romanticism. It's the consistent finding of serious studies. People who undergo high-dose psychedelic sessions in controlled settings report long-term improvements in mental health, relationships, creativity, and spiritual well-being. Not because psychedelics fix you, but because they reveal what was never broken. Let's pause here. If all of this is true, or even partly true, then psychedelics are not just medicines. They are mirrors. They reflect the mind, magnify the soul, and dissolve the stories we mistake for truth. And maybe that's the scariest part. Because to truly heal, to truly awaken, means letting go of who you think you are. It means stepping into the unknown, without guarantee, without anchor, and trusting the intelligence of the process. In that sense, a psychedelic journey is not a shortcut. It is a ceremony, a rite of passage, a confrontation with the real. And like any deep initiation, it demands reverence. Setting, intention, integration. These are not optional accessories. They are the pillars that hold the experience. Without them, the trip is noise. With them, it becomes meaning. We're not advocating reckless experimentation. These substances are powerful. They can destabilize, confuse, overwhelm. That's why traditional cultures paired them with shamans, rituals, and community, a container for the descent and return. In our modern world, we're rediscovering this wisdom. Clinical protocols, therapeutic frameworks, peer support. It's the merging of ancient knowing and modern science, and the results are astonishing. Lives changed, trauma released, creativity unlocked, souls remembered. So what now? If psychedelics can open doors, who steps through? What do we do with what we see? How do we bring that clarity back into a noisy, distracted, ego-driven world? These are the questions that matter. Not just what happens in the altered state, but what happens after. Because ultimately, psychedelics are not about escape. They're about return to presence, to truth, to love, to the mystery of what it means to be. Let's return to the core metaphor, that psychedelics don't create new truths, but strip away illusions. They are less a paintbrush and more a solvent, dissolving the layers of belief, identity, and conditioning we mistake for reality. And in that raw, unguarded state, the brain begins to rewire, literally. Studies using fMRI, MEG, and EEG have revealed something remarkable. Psychedelics increase global connectivity in the brain. Areas that rarely talk to each other begin forming temporary, flexible links. The mind becomes more networked, less hierarchical. This is often visualized as a colorful brain map, where, under normal consciousness, specific hubs dominate: the default mode network, the central executive network. But under psychedelics, the map explodes into a firework of communication, like a jazz ensemble where every instrument listens and responds, not from a score, but from shared presence. Robin Carhart-Harris, a pioneering researcher in psychedelic neuroscience, calls this the entropic brain, a mind less ordered, less predictable, but more creative, more fluid, and paradoxically, more real. This is not just theory. It aligns with what users report: a dissolving of rigid thought patterns, a loosening of inner narratives, a felt sense of connection, possibility, and openness. People describe long-standing fears losing their grip, addictions cracking apart, grudges evaporating not through effort, but through understanding. It's as if the mind is briefly shown an alternate route and now knows the way home. But what's even more fascinating is how this rewiring can be lasting. Unlike traditional drugs that require daily dosing, psychedelics often create lasting shifts after just one or two experiences, especially when paired with integration and intention. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reconfigure itself, is enhanced. New dendritic growth, increased synaptic density, upregulated BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. These are not esoteric claims. They're measurable, observable. Your brain, in the days and weeks after a psychedelic journey, becomes more like clay than concrete. This is the window of becoming. The question is, what do you shape with it? And this brings us full circle, because altered states are not the destination. They are the portal. The goal is not to stay high, but to bring what was glimpsed in those states into sober, waking life. If you saw that you are not your ego, can you live that truth at the DMV? If you touched unity with all beings, how do you speak to your neighbor? If you remembered your soul, what choices do you make tomorrow? This is where the real work begins. Integration is the bridge between revelation and transformation, and it requires honesty, compassion, patience. Because what you see in the psychedelic mirror isn't always pretty. You may encounter repressed grief, denied guilt, ancestral pain. You may see how your coping mechanisms, control, avoidance, addiction, once served you, but now cage you. And this is the sacred labor, to face what arises not as an enemy, but as a messenger, to hold it, listen, love it back into wholeness. Psychedelics don't fix your life. They show you where you are out of alignment with truth. And truth, as Rumi said, is a mirror broken into 1,000 pieces. Everyone holds a shard. This is why integration is not solitary. We need each other, not to interpret, but to witness. To remind each other that healing is non-linear, that awakening is messy, that becoming who you truly are often feels like falling apart. But in that falling, the false self cracks, and through the cracks, light enters. So how do we integrate? It starts with intention, even before the journey. Asking, what am I ready to see? What am I willing to release? What part of me is calling for love? During the experience, the best advice is deceptively simple. Surrender. Don't chase visions. Don't resist discomfort. Trust the intelligence of the process. And afterward, this is crucial, take time to reflect. Journal. Meditate. Talk with someone you trust. Anchor the insights not as fleeting aha moments, but as seeds planted in your daily life. Walk the talk. Embody the vision. If you saw yourself as love, be that love at the grocery store. If you glimpsed your divine nature, express it in the mundane. Because that's where the sacred hides, in dishes, in traffic, in quiet acts of kindness. This is the rewiring that matters. Not just of neurons, but of narratives. Not just of brainwaves, but of being. So, where does this leave us? Psychedelics are not magic pills. They are tools, technologies of the sacred, invitations into deeper relationship, with self, with others, with the mystery of existence. They are not for everyone, nor are they needed by everyone. Some find these doorways through prayer, art, dance, silence. But for those called, and only for those called, psychedelics can be allies in the great remembering. The remembering that you are more than your name, more than your trauma, more than your thoughts. You are awareness itself, eternal, luminous, free. And from that place, healing is not fixing what's broken. It's recognizing what was never wounded. It's awakening, not to something new, but to what's always been. So whether through the vine of ayahuasca, the fungus of psilocybe, or the molecules of LSD, the path is the same. Inward, downward, through the noise, through the pain, through the illusion, until only silence remains. And in that silence, you remember. Next time on the Neural Nirvana series, we explore memory, meaning, and the maps of the mind. Until then, stay curious, stay conscious. If this stirred something inside you, subscribe, like, and share this with a fellow seeker. People who undergo profound psychedelic experiences often report lasting psychological benefits: reduced depression, increased openness, enhanced creativity, less fear of death. It's as if something inside them reorganized, not just mentally, but neurologically. This is the neuroscience of neuroplasticity in overdrive. Psychedelics appear to amplify the brain's ability to create new connections, dissolve old ones, and rewire itself. Trauma loops can break. Creative pathways can open. New frameworks for understanding the self and the world can emerge. But here's the deeper question. Are these rewired neural pathways merely biological, or are they tuning us into something more? Because across cultures and timelines, those who've entered psychedelic states have described remarkably similar phenomena, not just in sensation, but in meaning. They speak of boundaries dissolving, of merging with nature, the universe, God. They describe seeing sacred geometry, hearing cosmic music, understanding truths beyond words. They report meeting entities, guides, archetypes that seem both personal and ancient. Is this all brain chemistry? Or is the brain a receiver that has simply tuned into another channel of consciousness? Think about it. The pineal gland, long thought by mystics to be the seat of the soul, is structurally similar to the eyes. It contains photoreceptors. It responds to light. And DMT, the powerful compound found in ayahuasca, occurs naturally in the human body. We still don't fully understand why. Could it be that the machinery for altered perception is built into us, not as a glitch, but as a gateway? That psychedelics don't create hallucinations, but open us to deeper dimensions of reality normally filtered out for survival? Aldous Huxley's reducing valve theory proposed just that the brain acts not to expand experience, but to limit it. And psychedelics temporarily open the valve. But even beyond metaphysics, there's a therapeutic power here. Modern clinical trials show that psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, and ketamine, when administered with care and intention, can dramatically reduce symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, addiction, and end-of-life dread. Not because they suppress symptoms, but because they create conditions for transformation. Patients often describe these sessions as the most meaningful experiences of their lives, not because of the visuals, but because of what they realized. Forgiveness, oneness, peace, a recontextualizing of self and suffering. And this brings us to an intersection of science and soul. When a compound creates a neurochemical change that leads to a psychological insight, that becomes a spiritual awakening, what exactly just happened? Is this a trick of the brain? Or the revelation of what was always there, just hidden by our filters, our traumas, our conditioning? Let's go deeper still. The brain operates largely through predictive coding. It doesn't wait for experience to arrive. It constantly predicts what it expects to happen, and then matches reality against those predictions. This is efficient, but it also means we don't experience the world as it is. We experience the world as we expect it to be. Psychedelics interrupt those predictions. They scramble the algorithm. They introduce surprise, novelty, awe. And in doing so, they don't just change what we see, they change how we see. Colors shimmer, thoughts bend, time stretches, identity thins, meaning emerges where none existed. It's not simply that your senses are amplified, it's that the sense maker is disrupted. The storyteller in your head, the narrator, goes quiet, and something else speaks. Not in words, but in symbols, feelings, knowing. Call it the subconscious, call it the soul, call it the cosmic mind. Whatever the name, the encounter is real, and it changes you. Even skeptics admit something undeniable happens. It may not be evidence of an external spirit world, but it is evidence of an inner universe more vast and mysterious than we imagined. And this is the gift of psychedelics, not as recreational escapes, but as instruments of inner vision. Used wisely, they can help us remember what we've forgotten, heal what we've buried, expand what we've limited, connect what we've separated. They are not for everyone, and they are not without risk. But in the hands of wisdom, guided by intention, they may be the sacred technology of our time, inviting us to not just change our minds, but to meet the mind behind the mind. Let's shift from biology to meaning, from what psychedelics do in the brain to what they reveal in experience. Because beneath the neurochemical cascade lies something harder to measure, the emergence of insight, of revelation, of a truth that feels deeper than cognition, like remembering something you've always known, but forgot. Why does this happen? When the default mode network goes quiet, when the inner narrator steps aside, The brain stops filtering experience through personal history and bias. You are no longer the main character. You become the field of experience itself. A vastness remains where a name used to be. In this space, psychedelics don't just show you pretty visuals or swirling patterns, they unveil hidden architectures of the psyche. Trauma stored in the body, beliefs encoded in metaphor, shadows avoided for decades rising gently to be seen. And unlike traditional talk therapy, where words may circle wounds endlessly, psychedelics bypass the left brain's defenses. They deliver their messages in images, sensations, archetypes, language the soul understands. You may see yourself as a child, not from memory, but from presence. You may feel the grief of a parent, not in idea, but in vibration. You may dissolve into light, then return carrying only a single word: love.